Today is the 5th day of the August 89 7-day retreat in Springwater. Two things present themselves this morning to talk about. One is the question, what do you mean by conditioning? I hear that word all the time. What do you mean by it? And the other question is, could we look more closely at this feeling of me, I, self, soul, the person I? Is there something within me which is this me, this I, the self, the soul? What do we mean by conditioning, or being conditioned, or a conditioned response? Conditioned action, conditioned thought, conditioned behavior. By calling thought or action conditioned, labeling it conditioned, we mean, don't we, and this is open for discussion and meetings, that the thought or the action is determined by previous thought and previous action, coming from memory. Whether the memory be stored in the brain, in the billions of brain cells storing memory, or also throughout the body. The body also stores memory in the way we walk, gesture, move our faces. Whether all of this is controlled by the brain, I don't know. But it feels very true that the body itself stores memory. Linked with past experience. The way we think this moment, if we think, may very well determine the way we think the next moment. And the way we have thought in the past determines the way we're thinking now. And the way we have thought in the past was determined by the way our parents and whoever surrounded us was in touch with us, educating us, training us, bringing us up, indoctrinating us, thought. So our thinking now is a combined effect, isn't it, of all the thinking that has gone on around us. And then this brain itself going through some new rearrangements of thinking, some permutations of thinking based on past thinking stored in memory. I remember growing up being told in school, I was in Germany, that what divides or separates or distinguishes human beings from animals is that human beings are free to think and that the thinking is free, whereas animals follow inbuilt programmed instincts. And I was very early imbued and impressed by the power of free thought as it was taught to be. So we can also be conditioned to think that we are free thinkers, only to find out as thought itself is examined in ourselves and all around us, how determined it is on prior experience, prior training, and how everybody else thinks and acts. There's a very strong, I don't know how to label it, program or instinct in not just human beings, a lot of animals, to learn by imitation. A lot of the higher, so-called higher animals, not every response is genetically determined already. The little chick or little seal or whatever the animal may be learns by observing what the elders do and learns to imitate. And this is true for us human beings. We learn by imitation of what is done around us, the imitation being a conditioning factor, what others do. Amazing to observe in our little granddaughter, the almost, one could say, joy of imitating. And it's an ongoing, instantaneous process. I've read someplace recently that between the age 2 and 3, the brain is at its peak of activity, never that active ever again, to learn. And watching a little 3-year-old child, one can understand that. Whatever is said, done, she tries to do it, say it. Seemingly for no reason other than doing what others are doing, saying what others are saying. And a certain joy in that. Being able to say and do what others are doing. So depending on what kind of family, cultural, social environment we're growing up, we're conditioned by that through this capacity to imitate. Of course, we're conditioned severely by praise and punishment to do what brings us a smile, a hug, candy, permission to do something. The child will do the demanded behavior, perform the demanded behavior in order to get that. So we are conditioned by praise, reward, and the pleasure that gives. Pleasure conditions. Getting pleasure conditions us to try to get more of it. The same or more of the same. One knows how children inexhaustibly will say, some more, just maybe swinging them around. The same holds for punishment, blame. The behavior that is punished may be suppressed out of the repertoire of responses, or modified. Not always. There may be fight, rebellion against being shaped through punishment. But then a new behavior emerges which is still conditioned by the punishment, not in the way that the one who punishes wishes the behavior to be, but in a reaction to that. So we are conditioned by our reactions against something or for something. Conditioned through association. Everyone is familiar with the early conditioning experiment where a hungry dog, while being given meat to eat, also heard a bell ringing. And after that, the bell ringing would elicit salivation without any meat. So just because there was something happening at the same time, brain recorded it as a stimulus for eating, even though there was no food. We briefly touched upon it, but things that happen in close proximity, contiguity, spatially, time-wise, to a strong conditioning factor, a frightful experience or a pleasant experience, something close by in space or time may evoke that same fear or pleasure. One knows, doesn't one? One has experienced it many times, how seeing something suddenly evokes a memory. Maybe a certain fragrance or smell of food evokes a memory where one has smelled that before. And the pleasure that goes with it, or the fear that is associated with it because the situation was frightening. So we could go on and on, describing conditioning influences, powerful influences of books, religious books, or ideological books, which are presented with a certain air of power, sanctity, truthfulness, and through imitation, learning to regard this as sacred or truthful, because the people around one have a certain demeanor in reading it or talking about it, bowing to it. So one can look for oneself and question one's present responses, which we may think or have thought are free because we're human beings, not animals. And come upon the habitualness, the power of conditioning, which means one wants to do otherwise, but there one already reacted in a certain way, not knowing why or where from, but the reaction is there. Even one would not have wanted to react with anger or fear, envy or jealousy. And what we're asking here is whether our conditioning, which holds us so strapped, bonded, energy tied up in certain patterns of fearing, desiring, seeking approval, avoiding pain, whether that conditioning can come into consciousness, can come into awareness. Not just by thinking about it, but by directly experiencing it. The habitualness of it, the mechanicalness of it, the determinedness of it. And wonder about it. Well, that is all that is possible for a human being to perform, think, and act in the ways in which we have been trained and inculcated. Through all that has surrounded us, and our parents, and the people we live with. Now, someone asked this morning, is it possible? It doesn't seem possible ever to be aware of all of our conditioning. Sometimes, it may be said, become aware of the totality of our conditioning. And the question, how is it possible to become aware of all of it? And one should not get stuck in argument. Yes, you can all, no, not all, almost all, maybe 90%. That's not the point. The question is, can there be awareness of conditioning at all? Of prejudice, deeply conditioned prejudice against another race, another color of people. Someone who speaks in a certain way or has certain manners which are different from ours, which we think are right. We have been conditioned that way. To think whatever we do or our group does is superior. That's part of the conditioning. And in more recent times, one may have conditioned one's thinking to be, I'm not prejudiced. And it's still conditioned thinking, because prejudice may sit very, very deep. So it takes subtle and astute awareness in our day-to-day interaction with people to notice a fleeting thought about someone else being inferior or not as good as I am, or being in a certain way according to what we've always heard others say or read, or what has been intimated in movies or magazines, on television. This is the concern. Can conditioning come into the light of awareness, and in that awareness or insight, crack? Melt away, wither away. The way we think about each other, about the Jews or the Palestinians, the Catholics or the blacks, the South Africans or the Muslims, the criminals or the saints. All of our thought is conditioned. And it's a marvelous thing to begin questioning, what do I really mean when I use this word, this label? Do I really know this person? Or do I only know the label? And project whatever the label intimates and indicates onto that person. And one can never assume that it's not happening. One has to watch as a label comes up, as a conditioned response manifests of avoiding someone or not trusting someone or having ideas about this person's ways without finding out. Also, one may find that certain conditionings, the way we eat with chopsticks or with knife and fork and spoon, may not have a binding or binding influence, a blocking influence, unless one thinks one's ways of eating with chopsticks is superior, or with knife and fork, which is again conditioned thought of thinking. My ways are the better ones, we talked about it. But certain table manners, ways we have learned to talk politely, conditioned to talk politely, there's nothing harmful in that or to be done away with. But can one recognize conditioning in that too? And when someone does not have the same polite manners, or a different politeness which escapes us because we've not been trained and nurtured in it, not to immediately judge, but be aware of different conditionings in everyone, different content of conditionings, but conditioned we all are. Since we're very, very little, we're told how to do it and how not to do it, and we imitate. So why attach a special importance to it, other than the function that it serves? I remember growing up in Germany, table manners were something one learned to watch. Not just to have good table manners, but also distinguish oneself from those who didn't. To be able to tell who comes from what social class. And then gain feelings of superiority by looking down on those of inferior training. And that's not just so in Germany. One could say, what makes it so difficult to become aware of conditioning and gain freedom from the compulsion of it or from the rightness of it, the attachment to its being the only way? Why should that be hard? To become aware of the conditioned beliefs one has in religious symbols, gods, different religious conditioning throughout the world. Religious conditioning there is, but it's different gods throughout the world. Different symbols and ceremonies. Why should it be so difficult to become aware of the fact that that is conditioned, learned through imitation and praise and reward and punishment and blame? Why do we resist that which we do? Becoming aware of a belief being conditioned. We do want to stick with the belief that the belief is true and the best one. Superior to others. Remember coming to this country in 1950 or 51, starting college and taking a history class in which the history teacher was relating that Japanese people believed and still believe that their emperor had descended from a sun goddess or sun god, I don't remember. And there was laughter in the class that today the Japanese could still believe that. And yet there's no laughter about one's own beliefs. Maybe in Immaculate Conception, or the Buddha's mother being conceived through an elephant entering her side. Maybe people who had laughed at the other were so eager to believe to have a new belief. And unable to see that one was being conditioned once more to believe something. Why are we so conditionable? Let's stay with that for a moment. Why are we so conditionable? Probably many reasons. One that comes to mind immediately is fear. Fear of something untoward happening to us, being abandoned, fear of dying, fear of loneliness, of pain, of sickness. And out of that fear, the belief in some superior being to help us, to look after us, watch over us. Take us onto himself or herself when we die. It's the fear of the little child. Fear of being abandoned by the mother. More often the mother, because the mother takes more care. Culturally determined, maybe also biologically, of the child. Fear of no protection, of insecurity. And the threats, of course, that one has heard, that if one will not behave, not just father or mother will punish, but a God. There are frightening pictures of a vengeful Christian Judaic God, which I remember from looking at my little Bible. I used to love all stories, all fairy tales and stories with pictures. And I lived in these pictures. The picture of the angel with a sword, of course, as Michelangelo comes to mind, chasing Adam and Eve out of paradise. Or the picture of God seeing the two sinful creatures hiding behind a tree. No hiding from that angry God who will revenge evil-doing or transgression against him. Tremendous impact on a little child. I wasn't even indoctrinated in that. My parents didn't believe, as far as I could tell, but I had that little book. And the picture spoke to me, but there was already fear. Fear of angry parents, punishing parents, all-powerful parents. To a little child, a parent is all-powerful, alone by size and weight. So our beliefs are closely linked with our fears. To let go or look at a belief would mean to release the fear that may be held in check through the belief. And who wants to face fear? Nakedly, without a belief, as for the first time, unprotected by ideas of protection. We don't want to, but it's possible to do it. And one may find that our fears, which may have been quite accurate at a certain time in our life, are no longer accurate. They miss the mark. We're no longer surrounded by all-powerful adults who seem omniscient to boot. We can think for ourselves. We can discover conditioning. We don't have to believe that it is right. We have taken on the belief too that everything our parents did was right, or else we've reacted against it as being wrong. But the reaction has the original in it. Even if we've been very reactive children, there's a lot that we took on as being right, as evidenced by when we bring up our own children. The patterns come right through that we were trained in as children ourselves, before we can even think. One has reacted. And if one is a bit aware, one sees one's mother or father reacting in one's own actions. And again, the fear of being insecure or not knowing what to do makes one hold on to patterns. Because we don't like to be insecure, we don't like not to know, just as our parents. Maybe not all parents are alike in this. My parents were never wrong. It was unfathomable that they could be wrong. You felt it also that they felt this way. Although, in thinking back, there were some things that were done that I did not believe were right. There are always loopholes. This is a possibility of a child seeing some injustice done maybe to a sibling and seeing that this is not right, even though the all-powerful parent does it. But we were asking a while ago, why is it so difficult to become aware of the conditioning, of the beliefs, the prejudices, the conditioned opinions and ideas which so determine our perceptions, so that perception is not clear, is distorted by the conditioned beliefs and prejudices and ways of thinking. And maybe here we come to the second question. It's gotten quite late. We still have tomorrow and another day. What is this feeling of meanness, I-ness, selfness, which is so strongly identified with the beliefs and prejudices and opinions and ways of doing things? Even minor ways of doing things we're identified with, which manifests when somebody criticizes it or says, why do you do it that way? That seems a silly way of doing it. We're hurt. We become angry. We defend it. We lash out. Say, well, your ways are silly. what is this me that needs to defend its ways, its conditioned ways? What is it? Is one interested? Or does one have a fixed opinion about it that is something everybody has and it's human nature? It's absolutely necessary for functioning in an integrated way. All kinds of explanations for the self to be necessary or functional, but we're questioning it, what it is. Functional or not, what is it? What makes it up? Not believe in it, which we do until we question it. We believe in it deeply and dearly, that this is a reality. The feeling of me. The feeling, the thought, a deep sensation that there is me. Myself, I. What makes it up? What is its substance? If one doesn't believe it and leave it there, which I don't think anyone here does. Not only no one here does, but in sitting, it becomes quite evident what a good part of this me is all the voices, all the pictures, all the thoughts about me, all the images of me, what I am, what I want to be, how I want to be seen by others, and the fear if I mess up, then how will they see me? Observing this and having observed this for many, many, many years, coming from the same position as almost everybody else does, in assuming there is something there, because we've believed it all our life, and all the feelings that go with thoughts of sadness, desire, fear, strength, faith. They have reaffirmed time and time again that there is such a thing as me, having come from that same position, having looked at it, and still looking at it. All that reveals itself is a continuous series of memories with their associated sensations and emotions of me, the way I was told I was, the way I wanted to be. A string of memories strung together in a sequence, which the brain is capable of doing. Just like a movie projector is capable to produce out of single frames of pictures the illusion of someone moving on the screen. So the brain is capable of stringing together all the memories I have of myself and how I was seen by others, treated by others. Pictures emerging out of that. And out of that, the emergence of a story of my life, the story of me. And the attachment to that story. And everything that goes with a story, all the added things of my beliefs, my prejudices, my opinions, my ways of doing things. My knowledge, my talents. my fears, my desires, all the story of me. Projectable into the future. As continuing and wanting to continue. A deep desire for continuing as this known me, maybe with added projections of what I may become in the future, may be in the eyes of others. And with the attachment to this story, inevitably, the fear of dying, fear of death, fear of ending. Just as one becomes attached to the characters in a good novel, one doesn't want that to end. One doesn't want the character to die, one doesn't want the novel to end. And that's why new sequences come out in novels and on TV, sequences. Because people don't want their favorite heroes to end and is identified with them. Someone in a novel or on the screen dying is oneself dying, or a bit of oneself. It's interesting in talking with someone this morning who brought up the question himself, what is this me? Could we explore into that? And asking the person to say what first comes up in connection with the inquiry into me. First thing he said was wanting to continue. Second thing was wanting to be happy. Me, my idea of myself, wanting to continue. You could say, no, wait a minute, it's not just the idea, I want this body to continue. And that may be so, but the body is closely and deeply associated with the idea of me, my picture of myself, my name, my past. It's not just a body walking, eating, breathing fresh air, walking up the hill. It can be that wonder of wonders, but most of the time it's me walking there, me having a good time. Or the moment one thinks, do I have a good time? Maybe answering, no, I'm not. I'm worried about continuing, about my future, about what I will be or what will happen to me. So can one wonder alone or together why this tremendous attachment to the story of me with all of its conditioning, cultural, social, religious, political, family. Why the attachment? Not I shouldn't be attached, but learning about the attachment, wondering about it, learning about it. Finding out that with this deep attachment goes the fear of not being, or the hurt of being criticized, talked to in ways which does not correspond to one's image. And with the hurt goes the almost immediate response of retaliating in one way or another. tit for tat, eye for an eye response. I wonder whether it's already genetically programmed into us. But it doesn't matter. It's there. It's observable. And one can question it, whether it has to continue. I think we've come to that in every talk. It's so important. Because the world would be a different world. Or our relationship, you and me, will be a different relationship if that response of retaliating, tit for tat, is aired, is seen. Maybe at first after it happened, maybe days after it happened, hours after it happened, a moment after it happened. And then maybe as it is happening, and maybe before it's happening, as it wants to manifest. Without it becoming a conditioned response of repressing it because it's bad, it's morally wrong. So I'm not talking about moral right and wrong. I'm looking at what it does and has done in the world. In the smallest of circles of the family. And globally, nation against nation. Or religious sect against religious sect. Human beings taking each other's lives or torturing each other. To retaliate for wrongdoing everlastingly. Wherever the conditioning may first have started or come from, doesn't matter, does it? The whole history of our conditioning doesn't matter. I may be mistaken in some things I say, in all things I say. But can we still watch conditioning now as it manifests? The unfreedom of responding automatically, mechanically. Wanting to do one thing and finding oneself having done another. Wanting to say something and finding one has said something else. And the less grave things, just the way we walk or gesture. Maybe the way our face wrinkles up. To a moment of becoming aware of that is such an amazing moment. Because a wrinkle or held may release at the moment of awareness. And out of that awareness of this conditioned facial movement or fixture, out of the awareness of it may drop a thought. I should, I shouldn't, he is, she isn't. The awareness of a facially conditioned response may release the thought that holds it there. And as it's seen, it doesn't have to continue because it's seen. It's not automatic anymore. It's not happening dimly, darkly. It's happening in bright daylight. It's seen in bright daylight. Don't take seeing too literal. It means awareness. Noticing it freely, not judgmentally. Not even intentionally. It just comes into awareness that the mouth is tight or the brow is furrowed or the forehead is wrinkled upward. Or the hand is held tight. Tight fist, though we talked about people saying, I find I grind my teeth. They're very little things that one can notice. And what a release to notice something that has been going on unnoticed all one's life. And in mechanicalness, energy is tied up, which is freed by noticing it. By moving freely rather than mechanically, or awarely. By which I don't mean self-consciously, that superimposes itself so quickly. The image, oh, I'm walking like this now, I'm a free person, or something like that. With that, some wrinkle sets in again someplace. And one can notice that and let go of it. The quicker it's noticed, the quicker it's gone, because the less embedded it is, the quicker it can go. And the question that was asked, can all of it come into awareness? Who knows? We accumulate new conditionings as quickly maybe as we see old ones. We have a whole lifetime to work, to discover, and the beauty of discovering. The joy of the freedom to discover things. That entangle human beings, like you and me. It's not the question whether one discovers all of it, but is the mind open to discover? What's there? What's right there, under the nose, under the foot, in front of the eyes? We will end here for today.